Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Big Things and Big Stories. Today we are going to introduce another interesting personality called Mr.Tilak Dissanayake. Mr. Tilak, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ripon.
Okay. So Mr. Tilak has worked for 40 years in various companies in the corporate sector. So Mr. Tilak, can we just explain about the companies?
Sure, no. So a variety of companies. I started my life at the Boeing commercial airplane company. And I was there at Boeing for 12 years, worked in the commercial side, military side, then also in artificial intelligence, real artificial intelligence, not the data mining that passes off as artificial intelligence now. And then went to Xerox. AI took me to Xerox and worked on the business side as well. So about total 20 years between Boeing and Xerox. And then I went to Silicon Valley at the beginning of the internet boom, 96. And then I was there for the bust as well, and then came to Sri Lanka in 2001 to look after my father. So I stayed here even after he died in 2007, and now I'm doing all kinds of things, particularly this Robotic Air Cargo Network, which is being an entrepreneur after having worked for people, which is basically saying that you're broke. That's what being an entrepreneur means, that you have to scrambling around continuously for money. And just to give you a little bit of background, so this project now recently I started funding it on my social security, which is the pension. And these guys who work with me are very kind, and they work for very low salaries because the work is interesting. So we hope that we'll get this funded and so I can pay them better, right?
So recently we can see in the workshop area, so we can see aeroplanes and so many robotic stuff which is happening right now in this very building. So when did this start?
So the project for the Robotic Air Cargo Network started in 2013, where I started working on it full time, and then it has gone through the usual pivoting about 3 years ago that we came up with this model, and so it's total, if you look to see, it's about 7 years into it with various teams along the way, and so we are now hammering along, and hopefully we are lobbying the government saying that they should fund these kinds of projects because they can make an enormous business benefit to the country, as we chat a little bit. So the returns are huge for about $250 million to $300 million investment, but the government will get back 40 times as much in taxes. Now a lot of people say that the government doesn't have any money, but I remind you that the last government had something called the Enterprise Sri Lanka Loan Scheme, where they handed out almost $600 million. So if the government wants to, they can find money. And so we have a very solid business case. And as I pointed out to you earlier when you were chatting, this is product design engineering, not research and development at all. So we design products using only commercially available materials and components. And again, to solve a business problem, not because of the fact that it's a science fair project. So it's an airplane that has got enormous commercial potential, and we can sell, we anticipate, about 9 million units worldwide at $40,000 each, right? And then there's another version that'll be about $80,000.
Okay. So what is the current project that I can see? So it's
Sure.
Robotic Air Cargo Network.
Yes.
So is that the name of the
Yes.
project?
Yes.
So what does that project do, and what is the end result that you are looking for?
Right. So Nipun, the business problem that we're trying to solve is called courier middle mile transport. So if you want a package sent to Kandy, you call up one of the local courier companies, Certis, Pronto, Domex, or Barnes, and they'll come to your house and pick up the package. Then they'll take it to their hub and overnight send it to Kandy. Let's say it's a shipment to Kandy, and then the last mile delivery is done there by their courier. Guy on a motorcycle will deliver the package. So we are saying that part which happens overnight in a van, we replace that with our airplane, so that in a few minutes or a few hours they can get the package there. Now the business that we are really in is catering to impatient online shoppers. That's the business that we are actually in, because that's the business need or the need that people have. They've gotten impatient and want it right away, rather than being willing to wait for a day or two. So that's the business problem that we're trying to solve. And I'll give you the things. So we are designing the entire ecosystem for this thing, not just an airplane, which is this airplane that can carry minimum 50 kilograms, but also the software for an airline, and the airline would buy these airplanes and operate them from an airport, which is a small, about 300 meter by 300 meter airport, which is about 9 or 10 hectares. And then there's airways between these major cities that couriers operate out of, and an air traffic management system, very importantly, that complies with all these rules and regulations that are there from the International Civil Aviation Organization. And then, of course, a battery fuel company that provides the charged batteries to the airline and returns discharged batteries that they charge and put in the airplane. So we have creating the entire hardware plus the software design, and we will certify it to be licensed manufactured by people in Sri Lanka as well as overseas. So we are essentially a design house. So the airfield and everything will be all certified, and we'll give the design, so somebody will build and operate airfields, air traffic management system, and we charge them a small fee for every transaction. That's the model.
As you have mentioned in the beginning, when we had a small chat in the beginning. So as you have mentioned in the beginning, so this whole system is automated.
Yes.
So if it is automated, so do you have any? What are the challenges that you are facing currently,
Sure.
and also what will be the challenges? Will be upcoming challenges
Right.
when you are doing this automatically.
Right.
So when this is automated, what will be the upcoming challenges? Because as this is a whole new project to Sri Lanka, so and also this is a whole new project. So this project will change the whole system, the delivery system, and just like online shopping.
Right.
So the online shopping system, it takes at least minimum 1 week. So as you mentioned in the beginning, so this can do with overnight delivery system.
Or
so
same day delivery.
Same day.
Same
yeah.
day delivery.
So
Right.
what
a few
will
hours.
be the
Right.
upcoming challenges that you have
Right.
to face?
So there are a variety of challenges. So the main thing is on this kind of a project, the first thing that you have to do is to understand, because all civil aviation is governed by the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is a UN body based out of Montreal. So there are 19 annexes that we have to comply with. So we met with the local civil aviation authority and then discussed with them and said, here are the rules of the air that we fly under, which is instrument flight rules. I won't bother getting into details. In segregated airways, meaning that in these airways, it will only be these airplanes, not everybody else's airplanes. And then separation assurance, which is making sure that planes don't crash into each other, our airplanes, is from this air traffic management system that I talked about. So we've addressed the main concerns that they have. So we won't be integrating in with manned air flights in the airspace because we are segregated. So that's the initial starting point. But then later on, the air traffic management system that we're developing can be extended so that it can be integrated with other parts where there's manned flights also going on, and we get more and more. From a security perspective, very importantly, because we don't have a pilot, it's automated, so nobody can essentially hijack, or the pilot is suicidal and go and crash it into temple trees or something like that. So that scenario is not going to happen. The airways are also geo-fenced, meaning that the plane can't get outside of think of it as a railroad track in the sky.
So that means you all are going to create a separate track for these airplanes.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
what if the weather conditions? If are you all considering the weather conditions as well?
Yes.
For this?
Right. So the generally there would be an idea that if the weather conditions are bad, that you might want to fly on a separate track. So what we do is we say, no, you can't do that. It's almost like a train track in the sky. So now trains just don't go all over the place, they go only on the track. So at the beginning part will be well-defined tracks in which we'll go.
When you all are done with this project,
Yes.
so any ideas can you all please share? What are the courier companies that you all are planning to start off this project?
Right. So the primary customers, Nipun, would be the local courier companies. As I mentioned, Certis, Pronto, Domex, Abans, and then there's some other smaller emerging players as well. And then, of course, the other ones who are interested in this are the international courier companies,
So have
like
you all,
FedEx.
have you all spoken to them with orders?
So FedEx.
Any meeting rounds?
FedEx, we met with FedEx and discussed this thing. And their primary interest is if there is an airfield near the Katnayake airport, what they would love to do is to take their packages that need to get, say, delivered to Kandy or Jaffna to that airport. Then our airplane will take it to that destination so they can deliver it the same day rather than having to put it on a truck and send it overnight. So there are same concerns. Same thing with package going outbound packages also, rather than picking up in Jaffna, driving it to Colombo and putting on an airplane to go overseas. They can use our network. So there's huge opportunities for courier companies. Then there's also the various shippers of let's say perishable items, whether it's fresh seafood. So we'll be we had an initial meeting with the exporters of fresh food, because they're also a group of people that want to get the goods to the airport as quickly as possible, and then to ship it out overseas.
So as you have mentioned about the fresh foods and the goods, so can we have a small idea? So what are the goods and the products that you're planning to ship, planning to transport through these aircrafts? Any jewelries,
anything. We can take gems from Ratnapura can come to Colombo in 15 minutes without having to be on the Avisavela road for 2 hours. Let me just show you that. So here's the concept is that if we set up a bunch of these controlled environment farms in rural areas, then the goods from that, the fresh harvest, can be flown to Mattala and then exported to the Eastern Hemisphere. So Sri Lanka has a chance to become a fresh food exporter. Now obviously already we do seafood and certain items. There's a Lanka salad company that in Chilao that exports some stuff to the Maldives. So those kinds of businesses can be expanded tremendously. Now creating agriculture in controlled environments, because of climate crisis now you can't do agriculture in a controlled way. So it's either drought followed by torrential rains or whatever. So there's a huge opportunity. So this is Sundrop Farms in Australia that they produce on average 40 tons of tomatoes a day out of a $150 million facility, which includes a 40 megawatt concentrated solar power plant and a desalination facility. So they only use salt water and sunlight to run this huge.
And while you're making the airfields and also while you're getting the authorities done, so getting the paperwork most importantly, what are the challenges that you're currently facing towards them?
So currently the biggest issue is funding, right? So,
funding, so you're looking for investors.
No, actually with these kinds of projects, Nipun, should be funded by government loans. So our argument is that equity funding investors are very impatient. So this is a project that takes 4 years to get to market, and then you'll most probably become cash flow positive in about year 8. You've never heard of a venture capitalist who's got that kind of patience. Now somebody's told me that there are some venture capitalists who will make money the old-fashioned way, which is from the profit of the company. So if they're willing to take a 15-20 year journey, we'll gladly talk to them. But typically these are the kinds of things that post World War II, if you look at the economies of Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, China, various parts, definitely came up because of the fact that the government gave low interest, long grace period loans to get it going, because the economic benefit is enormous. As we talked initially, that $250 to $300 million loan will translate out into $12 billion to the government in taxes over the 20 years. So that's 40 times return. Not to mention $1 trillion in exports, high-tech exports, about $400 billion in GNP increase, which comes out to $1,100 per capita per year from year 5 through 20, over 16 years. And then tens of thousands of high-paying jobs in design engineering and as well as manufacturing. So these are the kinds of projects that have huge impact. So for that money, so we invite anybody to come and look at our assumptions, what we make in the business case. Right.
Yeah. Mr. Tilak, yes, as you have mentioned earlier, so about the product design graphs and all. So can you just explain, so that you have this in hand?
Sure.
So just explain about more.
Absolutely. So everything starts off with a business problem, and so the heart of that is the business model canvas, which talks about customer segments, and what is the value proposition in the product that we have. So here what you see is as I mentioned earlier, what we are offering is impatience, to address that impatience that people have, rather than overnight delivery, the middle mile transport, a few minutes or few hours, Candy in half an hour, Nureli in an hour, which are all stunning things. And then we look for the market potential in the 193 countries that are contract with the International Civil Aviation Organization. And we think there's about 60-70 million unit market potential. We are making the business case on about 9 million units go worldwide. So we're picking about 15%. And what you do is then you define the high level concept and functionality after you look at the needs, functional spec, competitive analysis against other players, and then of course very importantly supporting the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So out of the 17 that are there, we address about 12 of them. So it has an impact from a sustainability perspective as well. Then what you do is you move on to identifying the certification standards and the development practices to make this project happen. So very importantly here are a whole bunch of ICAO standards, and then various is the airplane certification standard from a group called CHAR, and then development methodologies. So this is, now some people get really concerned about standards. So I look at standard as saying somebody is giving you the question before the exam and telling you what is the right answer in order to pass the test. So I think it's very good to work to standards, because we design everything to certify to those standards. Then what we do is we now start doing digital design. So all in modeling and simulation. So you see some structural work here, a couple of options, then you see aerodynamic stuff, and then of course the airways, as I mentioned, and then of course air traffic management system, and then airport design, and then expected level of safety, very importantly, and then of course some diagram here of showing how a courier company would essentially deliver a package to an airport, and an airline would carry it and then get picked up at the other end. So we do a lot of this, and it's an ongoing process. So as I mentioned, those big 6 areas, we do it. And then what we started doing now is this 1/3 scale ground test drive system device. So this is like called an iron bird, essentially that it's not going to fly, but we can test the ground drive system and all that.
So you're currently in this stage.
We are in this stage, and then we are doing
number 5.
Stage number 5. So physical concept scale, not full scale, and then of course flying airplane, which is a 1/6 scale model. So here's where we are at, and then of course we keep working on my social security, but then from here to get to this stage of certification, testing, and license manufacture is about 4 years. And that's the $250 to $300 million. And then, of course, you manufacture it.
So that's where you're looking for funds.
Absolutely. So now, if there's an investor who is willing to make money the old-fashioned way, patiently be with us, then of course we welcome them. Otherwise, government loans are the most sensible approach, because the government benefits tremendously by doing something like this, as I mentioned earlier. So that's the cycle. And then end of life recycling, and then of course once it's in operation, any change requests are then fed back into the cycle, and improvements are made to product releases. So this is the cycle, but very importantly we start here understanding a customer need. So there is a market need, and so this is the core around which any product design engineering project should be done, right?
So just let us
sure.
So just explain us about the product that you have built right now here.
Right. So this is as I said, the 1/3 scale model to test the various things, and what you're seeing here is the 4 propellers to drive it, and then of course the landing gear I can show you. And this is a canard airplane, meaning the control surfaces to pitch it up and down is essentially in the nose, and I think we can take a shot later, but let me just remove this nose cone so you can get an idea as to what the landing gear looks like. And we'll show operation later. But so this is to essentially retract and lower the landing gear. Let me just bleed this thing off. No, it's still connected to the thing there. But so this is the basic concept of the device. This steers. You can turn it, and then of course lower and raise the landing gear. and the back also has the same thing. Now, what's unique about this is that the front and the back landing gear can be angled so that you can come and land the airplane in crosswind conditions with the landing gear lined with the runway, but the airplane flying crooked to the runway. So this is from an old design from the B-52 bomber. B-52 bomber has got steerable main gear. So normally you see people doing crosswind landings, coming in and then last minute decrabbing and straightening out on the runway. So since we don't have a pilot, we can do this. So roll is done with this these canards as well as pitching up and down. So it doesn't have any control surfaces, no rudder. Right.
So since you all have there's no pilot involved in,
Yes.
so you all must be having a tremendous artificial intelligence technology for this.
Not for control systems, right? Yeah. So very good question. Thank you, Nipun. So we can't use artificial intelligence for safety critical systems because you have to certify them using a waterfall approach here. So you have to tell them what you're going to do. Now, where we will use AI is in the fleet planning, price setting, all of those kinds of things operationally, which are not safety critical factors, because we can analyze the data patterns from usage. We'll have huge amounts of data. I mean, if you're going to do 10 takeoffs, 1,200 takeoffs a day, then you have lots of data that we can analyze, including weather patterns, because these planes will be flying about 30 seconds apart, which is just slightly under 2 kilometers flying. So as it's flying, it's gathering all of this data as to which way it's pointing and which direction is going on. So it's essentially like a flying weather station. So all of that data will be downloaded, and then that will be used in the air traffic management system to plan the next flights that are coming along. So that usage patterns, where do we need to have more airplanes here during Urdu season, because everybody wants to have their Kaungkokis air flown from Colombo to Kandy or wherever. So that there we will use AI. For non-safety critical systems, absolutely AI will be used.
Okay. And just as the final question, so that I have, so when will be this whole system published out?
Sure.
So in which stage, which, how many years will it take?
Right. So once we get funding, it's 4 years to get it to market. Right. Yeah.
So currently you're in the 5th stage. So
yeah. So currently we are here, and then so from stage 5 to get to stage 8. So whenever we get funding for this, then 4 years later we'll be on the market, and so it'll be selling and it'll be operational. But obviously, from about a year and a half after we get funding, we'll start flight testing. So we'll create airfields between which there'll be planes flying back and forth. You can't charge people money for that. Can't do commercial transaction, but we'll be operating and testing and showing people how it works, mainly to the certificating authorities, because this will be overall system safety that we have to show, and so some things we will fly to failure and do that. 4 years from funding to being on the market.
So we are hoping to have these aeroplanes up in the sky within about another 4 to 5 years.
That's in commercially.
Yeah, commercially, yes.
But most probably about a year and a half to 2 years after you get funded, you'll see them flying, testing. So test flights will start most probably 18 months to 24 months and start operating. So you can see some of these flying in the skies. So it's just a minor matter of finding the money, right?
Hope for the best.
Yes, thank you. Right.
Mr. Tilak, we gathered a lot of information today. So any new ideas, any good news for the young entrepreneurs and also for the young inventors who's looking for ideas? So can you please give some ideas for the people who's young generation, who's looking to build things, who's looking to invent stuff like this? So what is your teaching? What is your guidelines?
Sure.
What are your guidelines for them?
Right. So there's a lot of difference between engineering and invention. Everybody wants to be an inventor and to be first. Now the problem is that then what do? You get a patent, and then that's the end of that story. So we are actually in the product design engineering business, not invention business, and so we basically look to see what business problem we can solve, and then essentially create a design around that. So as I mentioned earlier, Nipun, the business model canvas is a good place to start. Otherwise, you're a, let's say, a college graduate, you're a 23-year-old guy who's essentially running a science fair project with no idea as to what the business benefit is, and you're wasting everybody's time. So my counsel to you is start with a real problem in the world, get a business model canvas, and then essentially think that you're going to be an engineer rather than an inventor. By the way, for these kinds of things, you don't get a patent, you get something called a type certificate, and that is valuable all across the world because it's been certified to global standards. So my encouragement is, don't think about being an inventor, become an engineer. So engineers, very importantly, don't need to be first to win. In fact, we don't want to be first. We want to be third, fourth, fifth, because of the fact that we can learn from the mistakes of the other people. So I know in Sri Lanka we have this Sigiriya syndrome, that we are the only guys who did this thing. We are the first people to make a rock fortress. That's all lovely nonsense which is good for academia, or to get a Nobel Prize, that's invention, or to do applied research and get a patent, that's good. But the real money gets made in product design engineering, in this pillar 4 that we talked about. And you don't need to have anything new, you just have to have a better product. Elon Musk with Tesla is the best example. There were electric cars before him which never sold, but he figured out the formula that is appealing to customers. So customer focus is who we are rather than technology focus. I know this is very disturbing to talk about that because engineers typically view themselves as being gearheads who are only focusing on technology. You're a very bad engineer if you're focusing on technology. You better know your customers and the market.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tilak, for all the good news and for the good inventing knowledge that you have given
Engineering
us.
knowledge.
Engineering knowledge.
Right. Thank you, Nipun.
Thank you very much.
Right.